I could feel it driving into town, anticipation of sitting down and talking. I can only imagine as you get 10th, 11th, 12th, it must be a horrible sense of reliving things.
Yeah, absolutely. And reliving, I think, is pretty accurate for where my head is at right now. In this week, I guess, in these weeks, my thoughts are constantly in these days of 2012, of what was to be, the last few days with my son Daniel, and so yeah, I have very vivid and clear memories of what we were doing and where we were at certain times of the day on December 10th and December 12th and so it's been a unusually challenging time.
Does the passage of time, Greg, help at all?
It's different for everyone. For our family, it has helped. The pain doesn't go away, the experience doesn't go away, but slowly, day by day, the world sort of grows in around it until it's just another dark part of your life, and everyone's life has dark parts. So that pain, at least in my case, gets transmuted into anger. It pisses me off that we have to be here. Not just doing this, that anyone should have to do this.
Does the anger continue to spike? Does it peak around this time of year for you?
No, it's a constant energizer. I mean, you have to take it right. It's no good just walking around being angry. You have to use it. You have to transform it into something useful, as Mark is doing with his experience. Right?
I had a trauma psychiatrist once say to me, trauma is like a stick of gum that tastes horrible. You have to chew it and chew it and chew it until the flavor's gone. And then it won't be as traumatic. But the act of chewing or reliving is so painful. Do you feel, as 2 years turns into 3 years, turns into 5 years, in any way that the pain is receding at all?
That's a good question, because it'd be interesting to hear Greg's comment on that, since he's a few years down the road from where I am on this horrible journey. But I don't have anything to connect this to, of course, to compare it to. But I find that here we are, just about 5 years, and it's still very raw for me. I find it still very raw, and what I've done with my pain and anger is to turn it into the work that I do with Sandy Hook Promise, and first and foremost to support my wife and my children, and provide as much support and love as I can for them. But then to take this tragedy and try to, prevent it from happening again through my work. That's about the best therapy I've found.
There must be a divided state that you just want to be with your pain because that's what you're feeling. At the same time, you don't want to remain captive to that the rest of your life. Is that?
It's very complicated stuff. I mean, consider the fact that when Galen died or when Daniel died, our lives, as they were, also died. So not only are we grieving for Daniel and Galen and feeling the pain of our family, we're grieving the loss of our own lives. Our lives now start over. Our lives are new. We're different. It's all a new thing. So it's a very transformative experience, I think. Yeah.
And everyone who comes into your life, well-intentioned, people who want to give, be supportive, be helpful. I mean, I was just thinking, even I was here an hour and a half after everything happened, and I got to go home. I got to drive out of it. Sure, I'm in pain driving home, but I didn't have to live it. So you two and your families have to live this, and there's no respite. And that must be, at the end of the day, the most crippling part of all of this.
Well, you could say crippling, or you could say empowering. I do something like this, and people come up to me and they say, I cried all the way to work when I heard your story. And I want to say, I don't want your tears. I want you to get off your couch and put your clicker down and help us vote those cowards out of Congress. Let's get some people in there who understand that sensible gun laws save lives, that sort of thing. It can be empowering as well as crippling.
watching the political process unfold or not, watching Las Vegas, or I can honestly name another 100 or 200 mass shootings, watching that and seeing nothing happen by way of gun control or a legislative approach to reducing the kinds of things that happened here at Simon's Rock, what does that do to you?
It tells me that that's not where the answer is that the answer is going to have to come from the ground up. It's going to have to be the voice of the people. If you look at, as an example, when they put a sensible piece of firearm safety legislation on a ballot initiative where you take that political process out of the equation and it's the voice of the people, it almost always passes. And so I think there's a message in that it's going to have to come from the people. And so to Greg's point, we're going to have to appeal to these people. If it's one at a time, it's one at a time. But to activate and become an overwhelming, sensible majority who will eventually have to, the politicians will have to listen.
Do either of you feel like we sort of have to wait for the next generation to grow up, become of the voting age, and that's when it'll happen? Because the kids who grew up affected by Jonesboro, Arkansas, all the way to Newtown, they've grown up shaped like this in a way that the adults have not.
We're talking about a cultural change here, and just by definition, it's multi-generational. This isn't something we're going to do next year. This is a change that takes over society. You know, 80% of people say they agree with universal background checks, but actually only right now, only 10% of them are doing anything about it. So there's 70% out there that we need to reach. We're never going to convince an NRA guy that it's to go this way, but there's a huge majority of people that just need to understand the realities of the situation and the needs of the situation. And I don't think that's an impossible task, but it may be our kids who do it.
Tell me about your organization.
Well, Every Town for Gun Safety in America is an outgrowth of Mayors Against Illegal Guns. That had certain structural problems, such as the fact that mayors don't keep getting elected. So when Mayor Bloomberg retired, that organization kind of morphed into Every Town for Gun Safety in America. Every Town is primarily an advocacy organization, but in my job, I'm looking for survivors who find advocacy therapeutic, who feel good when they have to speak out. So we're making a real dent in this thing politically, and just keep going.
You were where you always are on December 14th.
Yeah, we were in the graveyard, putting up a tree over our son's grave. It's something we do every year, and it's a rich and nuanced thing. My wife and I, and the kids, and the grandchildren, and whatever extended family happen to be around. It's a time of reminiscence. It's something that we can do as a family, including Galen. So it's not that melancholy thing. It's just a rich celebration of sorts. 2012, we're walking home from the graveyard, and my daughter looks at her phone and she says, "You won't believe what just happened." And there we are. You know, what continues to anger me is people seem to be more interested in the coincidences, these awful coincidences, than in how did these things happen, how can we stop them. It's just the way people are. It's fascinating to them that such a thing could happen, but good God Almighty, look at why we're here. Somebody made a video about sending teddy bears to Sandy Hook to people. Mm-hmm. Truckloads of teddy bears arrive. Yeah. They have to rent storage space to handle these teddy bears. Hey, how about going out and voting for universal background checks? How about calling your senator? No, I think I'd rather send a teddy bear. This is the kind of cultural shift that we need to get to the bottom of that.
Do you remember feeling as the teddy bears were pouring in, we don't need teddy bears?
I just remember feeling absolutely overwhelmed and
comforted?
It was, comforted in the fundamental reason. I understand that people were doing this from a good place and they were trying to do what they could. But to build on what Greg said, it's because they don't know what to do. But really, what I guess the message we're trying to get out there is that folks need to be involved, they need to be engaged, they need to take a substantive next step that's more than sending a teddy bear, or instead of sending a teddy bear.
Is there a little surprise, shock for you that we are here 5 years later and nothing's been done legislatively?
Yeah, it was a shock initially that nothing was happening legislatively. I was not aware of what was happening in politics or around gun culture in this country until this tragedy, and then I was so naive to think that some of these basic proposals that our government was trying to pass, then with 90% support from the American public, would certainly be passed into law. And when they weren't, it was a wake-up call for me to study that and to say, well, what is wrong? Why is that not happening? And while you still had an intellectual support of those 90% of Americans, they didn't know what to do other than send a teddy bear. And so that's the work that I've chosen to do, is to educate those people and drive their awareness and hopefully get them engaged.
It's a hope-based
Oh, yeah.
endeavor for you.
Well, it was a hope-based endeavor. Now it's evidence-based. You know, we are growing as an organization, and we are seeing the results and effectiveness of the work that we're doing in prevention. And now it's a matter of scaling and reaching more voices to reach that critical mass.
What are you seeing in terms of results that is now not just hope but evidence?
We decided to take to modify our approach to basically really look hard at prevention and to get out of the politics and get into the stream before the gun is even in the equation, and teach people how to recognize the signs and signals. Before somebody does something like this, they give off signs, they give off warning signs. And if we can train people to recognize those signs and then take a next step to get them to the help that they need, we could prevent this from happening. So we've been doing that. We've been offering these programs at no cost across the country into schools and communities, and we've now already stopped school shootings. We have actual evidence that kids who have followed the model have interrupted the final planning stages of a school shooting. We've prevented suicides. So we have evidence that what we're doing is working, and so we just have to do more of it.
I'm just wondering from my report, and how many suicides have been stopped or how many school shootings have been prevented. Is there any data on that yet?
We have some data, but it's changing all the time. But I can think of at least 2 school shootings that we've stopped already. An 8th grade student followed the model, and the plan worked beautifully, and they uncovered this whole thing.
So it's December 14th, 2012. You're walking back. The phone starts blowing up. You can only imagine what goes through you, and you feel you need to be somewhere.
Well, we were there in our hearts and spirits. We knew where those people were and the kind of terrain they'd be crossing for the rest of their lives. Eventually, a gun activist in Gloucester, I think, put me in touch with you, or put us in touch together, and I think it was the next spring we sat down and just met. You know, that's all. There's nothing. Mark, you were in the planning stages of this organization, and it was really inspiring to me that, oh yeah, this guy's doing something. This guy's handling it in a way that resonated with me.
So many people had probably wanted to help both of you and your families cushion the grief, and very well intentioned, I'm sure, but there was a way, I'm equally sure, that the two of you could interact that was unique.
Sure. You sit down with your colleagues, what do you talk about? The things that you have in common. Well, we have a terrible thing in common. We joke, you know, it's like the club nobody wants to belong to, getting bigger every year.
So what happened when you first met?
You know, outside of our tragedy here in Newtown, Greg was the first person that I had the opportunity to speak to who had suffered a similar tragedy. And I just found a lot of comfort in, there weren't any necessary words that we had exchanged, but just knowing he is living and he can relate to what I was, you know, just getting started thinking about how am I going to get through the rest of my life with this. And so here's somebody who had several years of experience and seemed to be doing remarkably well, and it just looked like there was hope.
Was there anything you were able to share about, so hey, this is the roadmap. This is what the next few years are going to look like.
It's an emotive thing. It's a feeling thing. It's an empathic thing. I mean, we didn't, what are you going to say? What can you say? I'm pissed off that we have to be here. I'm mad that it happened. I'm mad that it keeps happening. What does that say? That the way we answer Las Vegas is to propose that anyone can carry a concealed weapon anywhere they want in the United States. To me, it says we got a lot more work to do. We've got a lot more hearts and minds to reach. We got to get that 70% off their couches and onto the phone, calling their reps.
When a mass shooting hits now in 2017, do you respond intellectually as advocates, or do you have a visceral, emotional reaction first?
Oh, total visceral, emotional. I know what these people are going to be going through now, and then I feel defeated. I feel like I just give every fiber of my being to preventing this from happening again, and then it happens again. And so it's hard to not feel defeated. I have to temper it with the work that I'm doing is all the more important, and that we are saving lives, and that we just need to continue to work harder and get more people engaged.
And I'm angry that my friend Mark even has to feel defeated. He should never have to feel that. Never, ever. 30,000 gun deaths a year, 100,000 wounded, each of whom has 10 or 20 loved ones who are profoundly affected by this.
Right.
What is, my grandson is all about zombie apocalypse. So when does the survivor apocalypse take place? Because if this keeps going, we're going to be the majority. Is that what it's going to take, really? Are things that bad? Well, we got a lot of work to do.
I was wondering about just that, your families. You have 2 children. Mm-hmm. Their lives have continued. They're not 12 and 10 now.
Right.
What have they made of the last 5 years?
James and Natalie are so fortunate to be surrounded by a large, extended, very close, loving family, and then a large, supportive community of friends and families. A lot of families who go through this tragedy don't have that support network. So James and Natalie are very fortunate in that regard, and I think they are thriving. Keep in mind that my 3 children were very, very close. They loved being together. They used to sleep in the same bed together most nights out of choice. And so when James and Natalie lost their little buddy, it was, anyway, I think they're doing remarkably well.
How often is Daniel talked about?
It's an interesting one because I don't want to make Daniel's life and death a taboo subject in our house that we can't talk about. I also don't want to dwell on it and distract from the good progress that my kids and my family is making. So it's a difficult line for me. He's in my heart and mind all the time, and I have to be very careful of how I meter that out or in.
Talk about things there's no book for,
There's
manual.
no book, right?
Yeah. And what has your experience been with your family now?
25. Just to pick up
Yeah.
on what Mark said, we are both very fortunate to be people of privilege, people who do have these resources before the moment of violence and after the moment of violence. We're healthy and strong when we go into it, and we have a lot of resources on the other side of that. So many people do not have those resources, and that's yet another part of the work. There's all this time before that moment of violence and all the time after. How did it get to murder? How do we make this community anything but a dysfunctional, warring society? There's a lot to do there. A family. We do a lot of humor. Yeah, we remember Galen all the time, and
How present is Galen in their lives?
very present in their hearts, present in our lives, and we joke about him. We talk about him.
You made a really interesting point that, even as I was reading about it, this coincidence thing. As you say, I really don't care about your interest in the fact that our sons shared a birthday. I want your energy and commitment to the issues. I'm just thinking as a father, when you two did find out, I don't know how it came up even. Did you remark on it? Was it even something? Oh my goodness, our bond is even deeper.
Yeah, I mean, I thought we certainly acknowledged that.
Yeah.
But I love your point about that people seem to gravitate toward that coincidence. Like, oh, here are these two kids that were killed in school shootings. They shared the same birthday and they died on the same day. Not, here are two kids that shared the same birthday and they were both killed in school shootings. What is wrong with that?
It's almost like teddy bears to me. I mean, it's in the wrong place. You know, there's a lot of energy available to people. And I think for any number of reasons, people in this society are distracted and really need to look at things in a different way. Maybe we can help them get there. Maybe we can educate them a little bit. Maybe we can inspire them or stimulate them a little bit. I guess that's why we're sitting here, isn't it, Mark?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That is why we're sitting here. People need to know that they can be part of the solution. They are part of the solution. They have the potential. That's what I'm trying to do, is trying to empower them with the tools to look for, to recognize the warning signs that are out there and take action.
So you compare notes about the pain, the trauma, all the personal, but I'm also hearing the conversation. You compare notes about how to make these organizations more robust and vibrant.
I think we're comparing notes more about that than, we know where we're at. We don't need to do that. The much more interesting thing is, come on, what can we do about this?
Right. Focus the energy there.
Yeah.
But to be doing this in this environment where you cannot see this tangible change on Capitol Hill and to still continue to remain as committed, that to me right now is the takeaway that's even a little more mind-blowing. I knew you'd be leveled personally, emotionally. It's the fact that you're not getting leveled by by the context in which you're working that's inspirational.
Well, the Moms Demand Action people always say it's a marathon, not a sprint.
If you reach enough hearts and minds and change their attitudes and behaviors, the policy will follow.
Do you feel that there is a mindset, maybe not in this part of the country, but in other places, where it is so ingrained, so knit into the culture and the worldview that you're proposing something that's never going to take root?
I'm proposing ways that we can train our kids to protect each other, to make our communities safer and to protect our children.
And I don't think either of us are proposing to take everybody's guns away. That's, we got a Second Amendment. Consider what a remarkable, gorgeous thing that Second Amendment is. We have unparalleled access to firearms. We have a right to those firearms. Nowhere else in the world do we have this. And what does that say? It supposes that we are mature and civil and educated. It's a brilliant thing as what it says about America. And look what we've done with it. Just open the paper, flip open your phone. You can see what we've done with it. It's been hijacked. I want my Second Amendment back. Yeah. I think we, as a people, have a right to reclaim that Second Amendment on our terms. And it's nothing to do with taking your guns away. 300 million out there. Nothing's going to change that. What we can change is how we behave, how we think about this.
So people are going to want to know in a piece 5 years later, 25 years later. If people want to know, how's Newtown doing? How are you all doing?
It's a work in progress. Newtown, for me, continues to be a place of amazing support. This community has just wrapped its arms around my family and really has kind of lifted us up. So we're very fortunate to have that, unfortunately unique privilege. I just continue to immerse myself in my work and try to honor my son Daniel that way.
Was there still just make sure I get one foot in front of the other feel to your days?
There does seem to be that. I have to just bury my head and do my work and love my family and hope I did that right at the end of the day.
And where are you 25 years later?
I'm getting old, man. My time is getting short. I'm losing my patience. I mean, I'm gaining focus. I'm gaining determination at the same rate that I'm losing my patience and becoming angrier and angrier that we have to be here. That you're sitting out there on your couch with your clicker when you could be calling some senator. I'm old, man. I want to get this done, but will I? I can try.
the anger spikes, and right alongside with it, the focus, the commitment, determination.
Clearly, and it's not a spike, it's a steady drip. It's not like that, it's like that.
Daniel's forever frozen at that age. How do you do that?
So James and Natalie were 12 and 10. Daniel was 7 when he was killed. So yeah, I always think of him as 7, but I always wonder, what would he be like now? He would be 12 now. He was on his way to being a remarkable person. He had a very developed sense of awareness of others and of compassion. He was a rule follower. He was a gregarious, affectionate, happy little soul. He had a great sense of humor. He had a great taste in music. I know I'm talking about a 7-year-old, but I will tell you, I wish everybody could have met him. He was a great little kid.
What was Galen on his way to be doing in the world?
He was into theater and lighting, but because he had he was different as a childhood, and I think he suffered a lot as a child. And on the other side of puberty, that gave him an enormous empathy for other people. He was brilliant at that. He was really something. So I did the same thing Mark does. You know, he'd be okay then, and he'd be this, and he'd be. I wonder what he. You know, you can't help but do that. But in some way, he's still out there he's still out there having his effect. It just happens to come through me and through his brother Brooks and his sister Celia and his mom Anne Marie. They're carrying that energy of him forward. And it's about all we can do from this side of things, isn't it?
I think that's a beautiful way to say that. I say all the time that this was a kid that would pick the worms up off the sidewalk because he wanted them to spare them from the sun, and always looked out for classmates who were sitting alone. And I think those are such beautiful characteristics. And so I've made a conscious effort to kind of try to carry that forward and to transport that back out again in his honor, his spirit back to the world through his family, I think.
Works for me.
That's a beautiful. I want to keep that. Thank you.